Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quinten Krzysko, Sunny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce, bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
You know, most years, the Bears win this game, this Week 18 game. Lost season, doesn't matter. I'd be sitting here going, it's a lost season, it doesn't matter. Most years, it's not against the Packers. It's not a game that breaks a 10-game losing streak on the season with your rookie quarterback starting. It's not a game that breaks an 11-game losing streak against the Green Bay Packers. The longest losing streak in Bears history against the Packers. 11 games. The next closest was a 10-game streak that started in 94. For that, a 7-game streak happened in 2000 and 1928. Yes, we're going all the way back to the golden days of 1920s football. Or a 6-game losing streak that started in 2010. Like 11 games. This was the longest period that any Bears fan has ever gone without seeing the Bears beat the Packers. And it ended today. And that's something worth celebrating, not to mention the first game that the Bears have won at Lambeau Field since 2015. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I'm joined by Ron Luce and Sunny Verma. We are Bears on Tap. Starting with Ron, gentlemen, how are you guys doing this evening?
Gentlemen, I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. It's wonderful, as a matter of fact, to see our Chicago Bears defeat the hated Green Bay Packers. Circumstances and meaning of this game be damned. It meant something to all of us. And as DJ Moore said, fuck them. I'm doing well, boys. How are you guys?
Sonny, how you doing tonight?
Oh, vibes are fantastic on this end. Illinois football wins their bowl game. Illinois basketball just swept the Northwestern new Big Ten schools. And now Caleb Williams leads a comeback on the final drive against the Green Bay Packers. I can't complain. I'd be ready if 2025, if this is a sign of things to come this year, boys, we're in good shape.
Man, it's just, in the wise words of Kevin from The Office, it's just nice to win one sometimes. You know, they won one today. Now, for this show, I want to talk a little bit about the game and kind of the ups and downs we went through and what our thought processes were coming into this game versus walking away. But I also want to talk a little bit about the season as a whole. You know, I mean, it's been a long time since we've done our baddest man and nicest man segments. I'd like to give a baddest man and nicest man from each of us for the season, for the entire Bears team. And then, you know, we'll wrap it up with talking a little bit about what's to come here. But starting with Sunny on this one, coming into today's game, kind of where was your head at and how did that evolve as the game went on?
I mean, I've talked about this before. You know, at this point, it was just like, did Caleb play well? Did Caleb play well? Ron and I talked about this at the post game after last week. I would have been okay with just sitting him down just because of the situation, how bleak things looked. And normally, every other year, I'm always like, nah, just lose. You know, get the higher draft pick, bring in a better player next year. You know, this ultimately doesn't matter. It only matters to the meatheads. This year, I was a meathead. Seeing Caleb, his reaction after the game and how excited he was and how pumped he was to get that W meant everything. And, you know, for me, it's just like, it is Green Bay. You know, for whatever reason, of all the teams in all the sports, there's no team I dislike more than Green Bay. And the fact that, you know, the fact that they're 1-5 in the NFC North, I did not realize until that stat popped up in my feed today. Same record as we are. And really, they're just a botched kick away from being behind us. Just brings a smile to my face. And again, I can't complain. You know, it's a game which I would have been okay losing. I really didn't want us to get blown out the way we had been over the past month. But, you know, the game came close down to the end. And I remember talking in my group chat with 2 minutes left. However this game ends, I'm okay with it. But I'll admit, once we did come out with the W, I'm surprised that I came out with a smile.
Ron, how about yourself? How did you come into this game, and then how did it kind of evolve as stuff started happening there?
I think like a lot of the Chicago Bears players entering this game, it was I was ready for Aruba mentally, I think, for where this game was coming in. There wasn't a lot of hope, I think. I think because of, Sonny, as you mentioned, right, the recent body of work, unfortunately, under Thomas Brown as interim head coach, I was kind of expecting a blowout. I didn't expect Jordan Love to get hurt, and obviously he's fine in the grand scheme, but they didn't want to risk anything. Malik Willis still played well. It coming out on the other side, I flip-flopped. I was like, oh, they scored. It was cool to see the shades of Johnny Knox and Devin Hester play get utilized with Blackwell and DJ Moore. And then it was kind of like, okay, they have a lead at half. Like, this is cool. And of course, I think we all kind of in that moment were like, there's where the Bears pissed it away. We got there. We finally got there. But then, I mean, it's the same thing that Caleb did the last time. He led them into field goal range. It was blocked instead of made. So it was kind of, it was nice because it kind of felt like it rectified a wrong. And something that I think we Bears fans just desperately needed. And I think the team needed. It was good to see for Thomas Brown to get a win. Thomas Brown, fun fact, gentlemen. This is courtesy of our very own Nick DeMeo. You can check out his game recap over at ontapsportsnet.com. Drop this in our chat here today. Thomas Brown has as many wins against the Packers. Actually, in this case, more wins against the Packers than Matt Eberflus, who was 0-5 against them in his tenure. He has as many wins as Matt Nagy, who was 1-7 against the Green Bay Packers, as John Fox, who was 1-5 against the Green Bay Packers, and Mark Trestman, who was 1-3 against the Green Bay Packers. Thomas Brown, as head coach of the Chicago Bears, is 1-0 against the Green Bay Packers. So if you go by those standards, he is absolutely the next head coach, because as long as you beat Green Bay, you get to keep the head coaching job. In all seriousness, it was,
hey, man.
Yeah, it was just nice to see them get one, like you said, Q.
Yeah, and so I want to toss one of the comments here, because this is just a nice comment from Ross John saying that today my son told everyone that the Bears beat the Packers for the first time in his life, and he was so proud for being 4.5 years old. It's a great day for that kid. Great day. But one main thing that I can't help but think throughout, like from this game, and it's, to touch on my last question, I came into this game very much, who cares? Like I was like, I'm done with this season, this team, this iteration of this team. We're moving on to draft season. Like, I'm glad we're here. But then as the game went on, it was like, okay, just win the game. Just win the game. Please win the game. And that's just like constantly building inside of me, like, please win this game. Do not blow this. And then, like you said, when DJ Moore fumbled, I was just like, of course. This is what the Bears do, right? And Caleb's almost exactly what happened in the previous one. They just gets right back into field goal range, and they actually hit the kick this time. It's redemption. I already said it's just nice to win one, but it is. Like, and the thing that sticks with me with that is Lambeau Field is not some boogeyman for Caleb Williams now. It's not some hallowed ground that cannot be beaten, that he's worried about, that like, oh, something always goes wrong here. Because we know something always goes wrong there, right? Like, it's not, it's a boogeyman to us, but it's not one to him now. And that is important to me, that he is coming out of this game saying, oh yeah, I just go up to Lambeau and beat Green Bay. Easy as that, wash your hands of it, move on. Like, and not that it's easy as that, but like, it's just like any other game now to him. It's not. I felt like always with Cutler, there was this back of your head of like, but it's the Packers. With Trubisky, with Fields, it was always like stuff just went wrong against the Packers. And Caleb's first experience against the Packers went that way, but the wrong got righted, and that's just, it's very good to see in my mind.
And that's huge for. That's huge for next year. Right? Mm-hmm. Like next year, of all the stones that we're going to have, the fact that the Green Bay story is not going to be one anymore. We're going to be like, no, Caleb actually, the last time we played Green Bay, yeah, Caleb actually did take care of business. We did win. we're not going to have a week's worth of stories saying, oh, it's been 7 years now since the Bears have beaten the Packers. It's been this long since they've beaten them on the road. All that is wiped away. Great for content. Might be great for those writers out there. But speaking strictly as a Bears fan and someone who wants to see Caleb succeed, he got that out of the way. And so you're right. That kind of sets us up a little bit for next year just to focus on other things except for our lack of success against the neighbors up north.
It's really like Caleb Williams today did his best Van Helsing impression and slayed Dracula. Like, that's kind of what today was. It really was. Lambeau does not phase Caleb Williams. Now, don't get me wrong. This was not a pretty game by any means. It's not Caleb's best game as a Bear by any means. But they gave themselves a chance to win the whole day. Special teams came through. Defense came through. It was really probably the most complete football game this team has played since the bye week. And they came out with an ugly win against an opponent who, again, has been the big brother of the rivalry, whatever you want to call it. And they did. There's just he came out and he slayed Dracula. And now it's, to your point, Sonny, it's not going to be a story anymore. Sure, somebody's going to bring up, wow, the Bears have only beaten the Packers once in the last 7 years, because of course they're going to spin it that way. But now you can at least say, well, he knows what it takes to beat the Packers. And let's be frank, his one loss was by a single point, and it wasn't his fault.
All right.
So really, if you think about it for Caleb Williams, there's not really any of these teams in the division that scare him anymore, and they should have beaten Green Bay both times this season. So dare we say that maybe Caleb Williams is the garlic to the NFC North that are these big, scary vampires that we've been worried about for the last better almost part of 5+ years now. They took care of business. They got it done, and Caleb did what he needed to do when the game was on the line, and they took care of it at the end of the day.
And another point real quick. Now it could be on the Green Bay side where the nervousness comes in. The Green Bay fans have watched Caleb, as you just mentioned, Ron, twice lead them down, put the Bears in position to win the game with an inferior team. And, we finished 1-1, but now it's the Green Bay side, I think, who, with the season that Jordan Love just had, who might be a little bit more insecure about the possibility of this rivalry shifting a bit.
Jordan Love, who's had some struggles this year, who's, been near the top of the league in interceptions and hasn't quite looked like the same guy that they paid down the stretch after last year. But I want to circle this back a little bit to both you guys mentioned the, Caleb looking good when he needed to and like down the stretch, and touch a little bit on this game plan. I felt like was pretty distinct. This game plan was, we are not breaking the sack record. And as Thomas Brown, I will not go down in history as the man who ruined Caleb Williams' career because his knee blows up on a play. I'm getting this ball out of his hands. He is not getting hit. I don't care how inefficient it might be at times. We are not forcing him into bad spots until we need him to do more. And it worked. It wasn't the prettiest thing. It was it was about damn near 100 screen passes were thrown. But you know what? They won. I can't sit here and be that upset over it because they won. But I also want to say, it's not an indictment on Thomas Brown as a coach, to me, as a guy moving forward in this league. This game today, like the way that it was called, the way the offense was run, I think it's a perfectly justifiable answer to say, you ain't putting this on me. Caleb Williams gets injured and never works out. It ain't going to be my fault. I ain't going down in history as that guy. But what did you guys think?
I think that was exactly what they wanted to do today, was just protect Caleb at the end of the day and give him a chance. And honestly, it was executed well, right? They had a little bit more success running the football. I know, DeAndre Swift wasn't going for humongous chunk plays, but instead of those 2 and 3 yard carries, there was more 4 and 5 yard carries. And that makes a big difference in, a lot of play action boots. Get Caleb on the move. He throws well on the move. Let him get outside of the pocket. Let him get away from Rashawn Gary, who's going to blow up Larry Borum on every single play. And they did that. Caleb didn't take a lot of big hits or anything like that today. Caleb was able to, he had to be greased up deaf guy on more than one occasion, Q, but at the end of the day, they did it. And I'll tell you this. I feel okay about the screens today because one actually went for a touchdown. That's the only reason. One actually worked the way they wanted it to. So we could all kind of sit back and go, oh, okay, good. You at least got what you needed out of it. But I think the game plan, it was simple. There was no real huge throws down the field. There was a few, but not many. But I think that's okay because for what the Bears needed to do today, your defense stood tall. Your special teams came through in a big way. They were able to get all three phases going, and it was, hey, kid, we're going to keep you clean. You might not have the numbers, but if you play a decent enough football game, we're going to have a chance to win, and that's what they did.
I completely agree that it was vanilla. But do you think that was a Thomas Brown decision? Or do you think it was one of those where Kevin Warren pulled him to the side and be like, hey, look, we're playing him. Don't do anything stupid here. Like, do you think this? Because honestly, if I'm Thomas Brown, I get what you're saying, Q. But if he's interviewing for the job next week, right? Like, for me, it's like I would try to maybe showcase my offense a little bit more and not necessarily show neutered tape out there. Unless I was told by the guys from the higher ups. And in that case, it shows that, I'm willing to work, with the management, with the guys in charge, and that, hey, we can work together. We can build this relationship. You can trust me. So I agree with you. I just don't know if it was a Thomas Brown, induced strategy or someone who may have had a little influence on it.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that to some degree too, of like, even if Thomas Brown isn't here next year, Kevin Warren knows people around the league. Ryan Poles knows people around the league. When he's looking at getting a pass game coordinator job next year, who are they going to talk to? Who are teams going to talk to about him, about the job he did, about, they have some source that they can go to with the Panthers from last year back to the McVay Rams, but like you want to hear the most recent stuff. And if, your guy's telling you that Ryan Poles said, no, we asked him to keep Caleb safe in that game. That game can't be truly taken as it. Like that goes a long way versus them saying, yeah, he went rogue and Caleb blew out his knee and we're screwed now. Like not they would say that to someone, but like there's different degrees of the ways that they can say things, or the things that they don't say speaking louder than the things that they say. There's different aspects to that. And I think getting a good review from a previous employer, despite not being retained by them, can go a long way. So, Sonny, I think you're onto something there.
Speaking of Thomas Brown really quick, and I don't mean to steer the conversation too far away from where we're going with this, but I really gained another level of appreciation for Thomas Brown in his post-game speech. I don't know if either of you have had the chance to watch it yet. But when he sits there, Caleb gives him the game ball, which is huge. And Caleb even says, hey, when we're motherfucking each other, we're getting pissed at each other, but we're competitors and this guy loves us and we appreciate him. Like there was a lot of love for Thomas Brown and vice versa. Thomas Brown said, he's like, hey, at the end of his speech, he's like, no matter where I am, no matter where you guys are, you need something, call me, text me, even not just football, life. That says a lot. And when you have that in a guy who's a coach, especially a coach who was in a really bad situation down the stretch, right? I mean, he was thrust from pass game coordinator into the OC role. Then he was thrust into the head coaching role just 3 games later. He did a lot of damage control this year, but he definitely earned the respect of that locker room. He's going to have no problem in the NFL getting another job. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets an OC job, to be brutally honest with you. I think those 3 weeks of what he did with Caleb as a play caller, and then seeing the evolution of being able to get the defense to rally, right? I think that says a lot to teams too, of like, this guy can get respected, command a room, especially with a team who maybe has a more offensive minded head coach. I think Thomas Brown can absolutely walk in any situation and get an OC job. Maybe Kansas City, for example, because there's a good chance that Matt Nagy gets a head coaching vacancy in this cycle. He's interviewing for the New Orleans Saints job, according to reports. So I really think Thomas Brown's going to be just fine, but agree with you guys, right? Like if you get that ringing endorsement from the Bears of like, hey, we put him through living hell as a coach this year and made him get promoted twice in a 5-week span. He did everything we asked of him. He got these guys to rally, and you saw them finally put it together against the hated Packers of all teams. Like, I think even with the lack of success the Bears had underneath Thomas Brown when he became the interim head coach, I'm telling you right now, I think he gained a ton of respect around the league, and he's going to be just fine moving forward wherever he goes in the NFL.
Yeah. Now, Ron, you mentioned that video of the speeches and giving the game ball, and since you mentioned it, I got to bring it up.
I know where you're going with this.
who was front and center behind the head coach and the quarterback giving their speeches, just, looking straight in the camera, clapping along, going like, yeah, team football, love it. Like, who was that guy?
Kevin Warren.
Wasn't Ryan Poles.
Yeah,
it wasn't Ryan
Sonny,
Poles.
who did you not see?
Yeah.
Ryan Poles. Now, it could be nothing. It could be nothing at all. And, point the finger at me for stoking hysteria over this. But, like, it's odd. It's weird, right? It has to be weird that Ryan Poles isn't in the picture there. I don't know. I see Kevin Warren as this guy who is just, everything has a degree of purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing, where he's at, like, and he's smiling for the camera there. That felt like he was smiling for the camera of just like, I'm here. And I don't know. I feel like I'm going to start rambling if I keep going on about it, but starting with Sunny, guys, what did you think of that?
I'm not surprised at all. I've talked about it on this show plenty. Like, that is what he likes to do. And it's less weird when you remember the press conference where they talked about Eberflus, being let go, when the press conference was all about Warren. Like, he was not who did the majority of the talking, dictating, like, what the talking points were. And Ryan Poles just looked like, he was there as, a little boy who was being punished and, just having his daddy talk. So I get what you're saying, and I did see your tweet about it earlier, so I knew what you were going to talk about. But having Kevin Warren involved in my life in other ventures before this one, it's really not that surprising. Like, we've talked about this before. Like, you have to have a certain level of ego to, advance as much as he has in this business. And I just think that there's certain points where you can see it clear as day. And he's shown it to you.
Definitely. I completely agree. Again, you do need to have the ego. The ego is the biggest thing. You have to have an ego to be in these higher up spots. Like, look at CEOs around the world. They all have egos. You have to. Like, that's what's going to drive you to work like a maniac and pull the crazy long hours. And, they last year, right, the piece of content that came out from the Bears was following Kevin Warren through a Bears game day. And it was literally every hour of his day from 4:00 in the fucking morning when this dude wakes up to midnight, because it was New Year's Eve. It was right after that Bears Falcons game with the snow. And as somebody who was there, I could say that was an awesome, incredible game. It just goes to show that, he has no problem being in the spotlight. And it almost makes me wonder, put the little kind of tinfoil hat on here, if maybe there is some news coming in less than 24 hours on Black Monday involving the front office. And maybe it's 2 people that Kevin Warren is replacing and not just a head coach. Because the whole time it's felt like he's the guy pulling the strings and he's the guy that's got Ryan Poles' balls in his purse. Who's to say that Ryan Poles is truly safe? And is Ryan Poles just a talking puppet for Kevin Warren in terms of football decisions and where they go from construction of the team and who they pick as the head coach and all of that? That's going to be very, very, very important and very relevant in the next 2 weeks. I don't know. But it's certainly a hell of a thing to point out, Q, as the season rings to it, and that he's front and center, and we all know that he's going to be front and center of every news report that the Bears are going to put out between now and probably free agency come mid-March.
Here's all I know. the Bears are running a very tight ship as far as information that's getting out, and every report that I'm seeing seems like it is paired with a caveat. No one seems to be very sure of what's going to happen. Everything is expected, might be. It all feels like everyone's giving themselves an out on stuff, which makes me think no one really knows much at all. Which maybe I'm reading into stuff too much. Certainly wouldn't be the first time, but that's where my feelings are at with it. But let's get back to the actual Bears, the Bears who play on the field. Let's talk about our baddest men on the season.
The baddest man.
It's nice to hear that again. Now, our baddest man, for anyone who may have never seen this segment before, we were talking about the player on the Bears who, whenever an opponent was walking off the field, they look over their shoulder pads back at the guy on the field and go, it's a bad dude right there. I don't want to see him again. Starting with Sunny, who was your baddest man for the Bears? It can be offense or defense on the season.
Oh man, do I take the easy one? Is it an even easy one? I'll just say Caleb, just because of the performance he had today. Not necessarily that he's been our best player, and I'm not even hinting at that in any sort of way, but sending us off into the offseason with that type of performance against Green Bay. When you listen to national media and Twitter and whatnot, they make it sound like he's having awful numbers, but then you see him compared to the last 27 number 1 overall picks, and he's averaging like the 4th best, 3rd best, 1st best numbers when it comes to all of that. CJ Stroud, right? Like the whole he's being a little broed at the beginning of the year. Caleb ended up with better numbers than CJ Stroud this year. I'm just going to give him all the credit, mainly because during the season, memes were made out of his apparent body language and how upset he looked and whatnot. But then you saw that same emotion turned around after this victory. And that just tells me like he's just an emotional guy. And he's invested, and he hadn't given up. Like Ron and I talked about last week, like we didn't want him to be put in a position where he's trying his butt off, but the wide receivers are not. So some of these guys are taking plays off. He never took a play off. And, despite being sacked, 70 odd times, he started every game this season. And we talked about how important that is. It's been a very long time since a Bears quarterback has had that distinction. So hats off to Caleb. I got to go with him as my number 1 guy.
Sonny, to your point, I don't know if you could have made his rookie season any harder.
Yeah.
Like he was playing on all Madden from day one, like type things. But Ron, where are you going with for your baddest man on the roster?
Well, quickly before I go with my baddest man, because I want to give us some discrepancy here. So I'm going to let Sonny keep Caleb as the lone soldier on this, but I just want to back up Sonny's argument here with some numbers for you guys. 5th most passing yards in a Chicago Bears season, 3,541 for Caleb Williams. 2nd most completions in a season, behind Jay Cutler's 2014 season. Touchdowns, top 10 totals for a Bears quarterback in a season. I mean, he had again, like you said, Q, the biggest shit show of a rookie year you can possibly have. He still put up one of probably the top, truly just all numbers considered, probably the top 4 quarterback seasons in Bears history. That's pretty freaking good. And that was with literally every odd against him over the course of the year. So well said, Sonny.
And I'd like to continue on that a little bit, Ron, not to hijack it from you, but like coming into this year, we had, I put together, I do what I do. I got in Microsoft Excel and put together all these numbers of like past rookie quarterbacks. And I was like, I expect Caleb to be in the tier of the Baker Mayfields, the Justin Herberts, the CJ Strouds, like around 4,000 passing yards, somewhere like 20, I think it was like 24 to 28 touchdowns. Like that was my expectation for the player. And I distinctly said, Ron, we were on the podcast going like, what would the middle tier mean to you? And I said, I'm disappointed if he's in that middle tier. And he landed pretty squarely in that middle tier.
He did.
And I am disappointed. I'm disappointed in the Bears situation. You put any rookie quarterback through this situation that they had with the coaching staff, with everything that happened. I think it's really hard for anyone to live up to the expectation that I had for Caleb. This isn't an excuse for Caleb. I am disappointed in him a little bit as well, but my ultimate disappointment lands with the franchise, not as much the player. And it just, not to be too much of a downer on a good day, but like it really is such a downer what the Bears have done to a generational rookie quarterback prospect, an excellent rookie quarterback prospect, however you choose to define it. It was pretty clear this guy was a top tier prospect, and his numbers are good. They're not in the great range. I hope that can be salvaged. I believe it can be salvaged with the right coaching, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me nervous a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the one thing too to consider as well with Caleb's season, though, I mean, he still had 4,000 all-purpose yards. He almost ran for 500 yards. He's a second leading rusher on the team as well. I mean, I know, like Scott says here, that for that top 4 quarterback bar is very low. It is, but with all the adversity, when you kind of tack that on as maybe the little asterisk next to his season, I agree with you, Q. I think we were all very optimistic, right?
I just hate asterisks, Ron.
I know. I do too. I do too.
I want clarity.
I am right there with you in the sense of disappointment with the Bears. But if you look at the offensive body work, it's really hard to argue that there was a guy who kind of stood out and really kind of took the bull by the horns like Caleb did on offense. I'm going to do my best to give another answer. My guy doesn't have stats. He's just kind of one of those guys. He had a really good year, and we got to obviously highlight it a ton here at Bears on Tap with our offensive line film room shows. But Darnell Wright's a bad dude. Darnell Wright's a bad dude. And he does a lot of weird shit. Like, he's not a traditional technician, does everything by the book, Joe Thomas-esque. He's the complete opposite, but he gets away with it because he's just that freakish athletic, and he's that big, and he's that strong. I think, especially playing in a season where he didn't know who his right guard was going to be that he was playing next to. There's a lot of chemistry and communication that goes into who you play with that guard as a tackle. It went from Nate Davis, who obviously is no longer in the organization, to Matt Pryor, who's not a true guard by any means. Darnell Wright did a lot of really good things this year. And when Caleb was getting pressured, it was very seldomly from Darnell Wright's side, specifically from that edge rusher that he was occupying. So, we got to see a ton of it, and I encourage anybody to go back and rewatch some of those shows if you're, itching for some Bears content during kind of the dog days of January and February that are coming up here over the next few weeks. But Darnell Wright had a really good year, man. He graded it in your scale, Q, as your highest graded offensive lineman on both phases of pass blocking and run blocking for a reason. Got to give flowers to the guys that don't always get flowers on the football field. Darnell Wright's my baddest man for the year for the Bears.
It's interesting. Yeah, if I didn't have number 1 pick, Darnell Wright was my other guy that I was going to mention. And I'm not even an offensive line, guru like you two tend to be. I just think that with the hype in the negative sense that came with the Chicago Bears offensive line, he was that bright spot. And, I am a fan of your guys' offensive line show. So for me, it's like getting to see at least him stand out and stick out. It's Ryan Poles has done a lot of things wrong. And, obviously, he may be paying for it on Monday, as Ron did not allude to, wink, wink. But he got that one right, in my opinion. He's a good player on that offensive line. And, again, if I didn't have that first pick, Darnell Wright was going to be the guy that I would have taken.
Yeah, I mean, Darnell Wright is coming from offensive line guys. Like, he is an outstanding choice here. And, there was talk about him coming into the season with an injury. It was unsure. It was never fully reported on. I believe he did play banged up through the first half of the year. And I think the numbers show that out where, weeks 1 through 9, I don't love PFF grades for offensive line, but they're all you got sometimes. And looking at this, he was ranked as the 28th best offensive tackle in the league, weeks 1 through 9, but weeks 10 through 18, week 18 grade still pending. the 11th best offensive tackle in the NFL. Like he has, and I don't necessarily like love PFF's line grading, but I think they do show trends fairly decently. And I agree with those trends. Second half of the year, Darnell Wright has looked like everything that we hoped he would be this year. And that's exciting. He has really come on as a football player down the second half and really looked like everything's clicking for him. And I think it gets better from here, which is just exciting as long as he can stay healthy. Now, for my baddest man, I think there's only one more place to go, truly. And that's the man who exited today's game with I believe it was a quad injury. Jalen Johnson made the Pro Bowl this year, coming off the All-Pro year last year. I do think that he had a little more struggles than last year at times. And I think part of that is just as simple as teams were forced to throw at him a little more. I know Tyreek Stevenson had a rough year, but there were games where Tyreek Stevenson, like today, I know he got beat eventually, but like he was making some plays out there at the same time in moments where teams said, okay, we have to go at Jalen, or we have to scheme towards Jalen. Where last year, I think there were more times where they just said, we're just not throwing his way. Why would we? So I think Jalen Johnson was the baddest man on the Bears defense. He was the guy who set the tone for the defense. He's the guy who holds everyone up to a higher standard within that unit. And I'm excited that he's a Bear for the future. I'm excited to see him play more football next year. And, just take a subtle shot at the same time, hopefully talk a little less next year.
And you mentioned he exited, but he did exit in style.
Yeah, he did.
Saw that.
How could I forget? He in Scott's words, he shows Packers fans exactly how he felt about them.
They sure did. I'll tell you, it's nice to see Mike Ditka get some company in that famous photos list, and now Jalen Johnson joins them. Gotta love it.
Absolutely love to see that. That adds him, just gives him a little few extra points in like all-time Bears list, the fact that he did that. But let's move on to our next segment here.
The nicest man.
All right, kicking it over to Ron for this first one. Who is your nicest man?
Oh, I'm going to piss off a lot of people, I think, but here we go. My nicest man for the Bears. This one I had to think about a little bit because it would be really easy to go, oh, the offensive line outside of Darnell Wright was hot garbage all year. Or, maybe DeAndre Swift, who's getting paid like a top running back, didn't perform like Saquon and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs and all these other really good free agent running backs that made a huge impact this year. Arguably, I think changing the running back market for the future. And I'll leave that for the offseason and all the good shit that's coming. But to me, he's making top money on this team. 5.5 sacks. You had more than that in half a season as a Bear a season ago. I think he's playing hurt at times this year. He has no help on the other side. But Montez Sweat did not make the impact of a $25 million a year player. And they need that when you have that much money tied up in your defense. Now, sure, the Bears can push themselves into the neighborhood of $112 million in cap space, depending on some cuts that could be happening on the roster. And I'm going to try to highlight that in written form over the next few days over at ontepsportsnet.com. Montez Sweat's kind of my nicest guy for the year because I don't think he made the impact that a $25 million a year player should. I know that defensive line struggled, especially losing Andrew Billings, not really having a true edge rusher opposite of Sweat. But I think there's a little bit of a magnifying glass on Montez Sweat going into next season because the defense might change. He might not be a 4-3 rush end anymore. He might be a rush end on passing downs, but you might be kicking inside and playing a 5 technique, my guy, if they go to a 3-4 team. They got to figure out a lot of things with Montez Sweat. And based on who comes in and takes over this team, the defense might look different. And you have $25 million committed to that guy for the foreseeable future. Jalen Johnson's going to be able to play in any defensive scheme. So his money, I'm not concerned about. Montez Sweat's maybe a little bit more. He's my nicest man for the year for the Chicago Bears.
That's a spicy one. Sonny, what are your thoughts on this topic?
That's rough. That's rough, but what Ron's saying makes sense, as it always does. Sweat became one of those guys where last year we could pencil him in, even marker him in as one of the foundational pieces of our defense for the next 3-4 years. And I think at this point, at least right now, at least I'm a little less sure about that as I was a year ago. I'm hoping this was just a 1-year blip where, hey, everybody stunk. We had the worst defense in the league, ranked number 32 from like week 7 on. Everybody just had a really bad year. I'm hoping that's it, and that he kind of bumps back up to the production that we saw the year previous to that. But spicy, very spicy take.
And for what it's worth, I mean, just based on PFF grades and numbers, Sweat, he was pretty good for the first 8 weeks of the season. And
It was
that Washington game, week 8,
broke him.
He got cleated really badly. I remember on his shin, I believe it was. He had a big gash. There might have been a bone bruise there. He, according to his PFF grades, his production, 4, 5, 6, 7. He had 7 straight games after that were just below standard for him. So I'm wondering how much of it might have been injury related, but it still bears the fact, it's a production league. What you do matters, and he didn't do much down the second half of the year. But Sunny, where are you going for your nicest man?
I'm glad I can pivot a little bit with my nicest man because, as Scott already in the chat said, those are the easy ones, right? But if Ron is going in this direction, I'm going to name someone, which doesn't mean that he was the worst player on the Chicago Bears by any stretch. The same argument I'm using for Caleb on the offensive end. In fact, Q just brought up his name in a positive sense when it came to the baddest man. But for me, when I think about where this season turned, we were 4-2. We were sky high. Caleb was playing well. Team looked like it would compete in the toughest division in the NFL. And then Tyreek Stevens taunts the Commanders fan base while there's a Hail Mary play going on. And then it's his guy who ultimately, catches that touchdown. And then there was that drama for a week, 2 weeks. You just bench him. Like it was a big story in the locker room. And then we lost 10 straight games. Like for me, it's just like, I know he got better as the year progressed. And keep in mind, some people want to just cut him right after that game. Obviously, he's improved only in his second year. That's not the point. But for me, the season started off so promising. We were all so optimistic. And then we won 4 of our first 6 games. And if I'm allowed to just, for nicest man, kind of piggyback off of the reasoning that Ron had for Sweat, for me, it's just Stevenson's just that move, that one moment, and where the season just collapsed afterwards. And I'm afraid that when I think about this season 2 years down the line, I'm going to be thinking about that Hail Mary play, which he was a big part of.
Tyreek Stevenson will be the poster child for remembering this season.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think he deserves this title that you're giving him, Sonny. Like, I really do. I think he has had a rough go of it this year in a lot of different ways. Like I believe he's up there near the top of the league in receiving yards allowed for corners. Let's see, I'm pulling it up right now. But like he's gotten burned consistently throughout the year.
While you're looking that up, like literally today, that play against the Packers, he positioned himself perfectly for an interception, except for he was behind the wide receiver instead of just being in front of the wide receiver, letting the Green Bay Packers get that first down. I think it was in the 3rd or 4th quarter. But
yeah, he's allowed the 23rd most receiving yards, but that's despite splitting snaps with Terrell Stevenson down the second, like for 4 or 5 games in the second half of the year, or with Terrell Smith, not Stevenson, with Terrell Smith through parts of the second half of the year. Like he was near the top before they started putting him on the bench.
We love some spice. We love some spice in the world.
Right.
Hugh, who's yours?
So I have three options, and you guys know I'm not short-winded. I've talked a little bit about each of them. The first one is along Scott's criteria here of just the guys who truly, I think, tanked the Bears season the most. So the guy, and he's not listed here. I think he deserves to be number one on this list, if I'm being frank, Scott, is Larry Borum.
Oh,
Larry Borum allowed the most sacks of his career on the fewest snaps of his career. This man was straight up unplayable this season. Like he had never been good per se, but he'd been serviceable. This year, I don't understand how they kept playing him. Like watching him today, my mind was blown as to why he was still on the field. Like I'd rather see Karan out there because at least he's gaining something from it. But like, so that's my first one. I can't truly go with that one because I feel like it's a low blow to go after a backup like that. So I have to go to our friends over at overthecap.com. And you know, when a team is this rough against their expectations, I have to look at who are supposed to be the blue chip players and did they perform? And we look at the top salary cap hits for the Bears this year. Number one, Montez Sweat, we've already touched on. And I don't even think he's the most egregious offender here. Keenan Allen, number two, $23.1 million cap hit. That's a nice chunk of change for a guy who, you know, put up maybe 800 yards this year and was pretty inefficient. But, you know, when you got Keenan, you knew the inefficiency was there. You didn't sign him to be efficient. You signed him to be a safety blanket. And I think some of it goes on scheme. Some of it goes on over-reliance on him despite that salary. You knew what you were signing up for there. And then I get to the third one. And this is where I say, yeah, this is my guy. This is my nicest man. We're talking about Tremaine Edmonds with a $22.4 million cap hit this year. One of the highest cap hits among inside linebackers. And, you know, if you're a fan of PFF grades, 59.2 on the season coming into today. Not good. The Bears signed a scheme-specific guy who needed to be playing Tampa 2, right? And his entire value is rooted in being that deep middle defender who can be long, big, and fast in space. And I just, all season long, aside from one or two games, he did get my baddest man one game, 1 week, because he made a big difference out there. But when you have the size, the athletic skill set that he has, I need you to do more. I need you to be a menace in the run game. I need you to be running into the face of blockers. And it just, there's too many times where he's just getting, he olays blockers, ends up out of the run fit, where he's not getting downhill. Against the run game, it's just like, are you sure you're a linebacker? You look a bit more like a safety a lot of the time. And it's just, you're getting paid top of the line money, and you are so far away from top of the line results. When we're talking about you're a scheme specific player in a scheme that nobody can run that much in today's modern NFL, I need more from you, man. And I know there's more there. Physically, there is more there. And it was maddening for Buffalo fans before he got to Chicago, and it's maddening for Chicago fans now because you can see the upside, but it's just, I'm turning this into too much of a bash fest, but Tremaine Edmonds is my nicest man.
Hey, Q, just so you know, they can cut him pre-June 1, or actually they can cut him post-June 1, and it's only $10 million of dead money on the books if you want.
So I thought there was a rider in his contract of if he's under contract the first day of the league year or something, his next year
is fully guaranteed.
It becomes somewhat guaranteed. So let's see. 50 million was guaranteed at signing, or 41.8 was fully guaranteed at signing. Another 8.2 million will be fully guaranteed on the third day of the 2024 league year. So yeah, okay, I think that rider's done. But it looks like I'm seeing dead money of 13 million.
That's if it's pre-June 1. So if it's post-June 1, it's only 10.6.
So, I mean, I would almost think you just do the pre-June one, because when you do post-June 1, you're just stretching it over 2 years. That's all you're doing. It's the same amount of money. You're just stretching it further. And when you have cap space, I feel like that's the time to eat the dead cap. But also, I mean, it's going to save you 10 to 13. He's going to cost you 17. Like, so essentially are you going to find a better player for $4 million? Because that's the question you're asking yourself. Like,
totally fair. I just wanted to throw this into the universe so that way people can do exactly what you just did and spin your wheels about it. So, because hey, depending on what happens, like what if Ryan Poles is canned and there's a new GM? Does the new GM get aggressive and start axing some of these guys that might not fit for the future based on who they hire as a coach? It's worth keeping in mind. In mind.
But gentlemen, any final thoughts on this Bears season, on this Bears game, on the baddest and nicest men, anything in your brain coming off the end of this year, starting with Sunny?
We started off the season strong. I'm grateful. I know ultimately it didn't mean anything probably, but in a way, I do think it did mean something. And again, I understand the arguments and they're all pragmatic and they're all logical that we would have been better off losing this game. But as Eric so eloquently said in the chat just now, I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I'm really looking forward to this offseason. I'm tired of the off seasons being more productive than the regular seasons for Chicago Bears fans. But, I'm excited about the future of the team. I'm excited about On Tap Sports here. Me working with you guys here at Bears On Tap. I appreciate the opportunity this season. And, I can't wait to see what kind of content you guys come up for Draft Talk.
Yeah. And Sunny, I know that you've got to jump. You got a big interview over at Locked On Illini coming up. So if you're an Illini fan, make sure to check out Sunny's channel tonight for that. But so feel free to jump whenever. I'm probably going to ramble a little here because I think you touched on something that is, we talked about losing being better, right? And earlier in the show, Sunny, you mentioned about being a bit more meathead focused in this one of like win a game. Like, and sometimes I think we forget, or I forget, that football fans are supposed to be meatheads. Mm-hmm. Football is a meathead sport. We're talking about people bashing each other brains in on a piece of grass to be able to get more, to be able to get an extra inch closer to the end zone or to that first down or whatever. Like, there is a meatball aspect to all of this. And I think when your team is consistently losing like this, that becomes easy to forget because it's like, you almost, as my friend Danny Meehan puts so eloquently sometimes, you almost forget how to root for winning, right? It becomes really quick to jump on that losing train, that tanking train of like the smart thing to do, the analytics thing to do, lose, get a better draft pick, get you this, get you that. And it's like, there is that meathead aspect in football of the locker room, the culture, the human element of losing is not okay. And I think as a fan base, as a team, they start to lose that. And that's just from the fan base standpoint, we can't compensate for losing football with smart decisions and smart team building philosophies. Because be smart with your team building, but you got the quarterback. It doesn't compensate for anything. Like, losing doesn't compensate for any of it anymore at that point. So win some games next year. I don't know how we can continue to support it if they can't just start winning some damn games.
Incredibly well put, Q. There's a lot of angst around this season, and I tend to agree with you, man. I tend to agree with you. Q, do you have more final thoughts for us?
No, that was my final thought. Sorry, Ron. I jumped you forward.
No, it's okay.
Gave me a perfect segue to it, so I was like, I got it.
We love perfect segues. No, all good. I just want to make sure I'm not cutting you off because this season was rough. This was probably one of the harder seasons in recent memory. Maybe it was being dialed in with you boys so much on a weekly basis, which obviously made the season a lot of fun, even though it was awful on paper. But at the end of the day, like Eric, this is my cousin, by the way. Big shout out to my cousin Eric. Says nobody on the team stepped up. Everybody regressed. Losing plays a part in that, but everybody seemed to give up. It really did feel like a year of like, man, they really punted on 2024. And they said, on to 2025, and we'll try again. I don't think any of us expected that. And for it to go the way it did was definitely disappointing. There is a a chomp at the bit mentality, I think, in this city right now for just wanting good Bears football to root for. Because to your point, Q, I don't remember what it's like this team winning every week. It was 2018 the last time that they won more than roughly a 500 level amount of games. It's been a while. And I hope they get back to that. We'll see what happens in the coming days. There's a ton more that we're going to be talking about in the not so distant future. Obviously, the draft stuff, Q, is going to be a big focal point for us here at Bears on Tap. But we got to see where things go. And I'll tell you what, even through a season that was just absolutely menacing for my mental health as a Bears fan, we got to end it in the most positive impact to my mental health humanly possible as a Bear fan, because fuck Green Bay. It was a spectacular end to a horrible season of 2024. And that little bit of hope makes it just a little bit more bearable for the next couple months before we really get into seeing what this team's going to look like for 2025.
Agreed, man. It's refreshing. It's nice to be sitting on this show with you guys and not be like itching for finding ways to find something to talk about that we haven't talked about for each of the previous 3 weeks. And so it's good to be here with you guys. We'll be sure to get you guys out there a show whenever something starts to change. We'll try to get on the mics as fast as we can. There's going to be a lot of change coming up here, I'm sure, whether it's one way or another. There's change coming. But gentlemen, why don't we get out of here with a good old-fashioned bear down?
Bear down, baby.
Bear down, gentlemen.
Bear down.